The offseason has officially arrived for the Philadelphia Phillies, and they have begun to face the music. Dave Dombrowski and Rob Thompson met with reporters for the first time since the playoff exit to provide some clarity for the outlook for the team moving forward, the changes that we should expect, and more surprisingly to me, what will remain the same here. So I'm going to dive into exactly the main takeaways from that press conference here. I do think this helped kind of put into, I guess, our expectations for what the offseason will have in store. So let's get to the latest news here, and starting out with Rob Thompson receiving a contract extension that will keep him in Philadelphia until the end of the 2026 season. Now, both Thompson and Dombrowski did speak on this. They spoke at separate times in the overall press conference here. Dombrowski speaking first and revealed that he was extended. Talked a lot about how kind of they love the core in place. Now, Thompson also himself stood up there when it was his turn and said, quote, "I also am very happy that our entire coaching staff is coming back. Many managers will say it, but I truly believe that we have the best coaching staff in baseball." So it is not just Thompson that is returning to this team. It is Kevin Long, and it is everyone else on the staff. Now, Kevin Long, I do want to return to the hitting coach, of course, who's been under fire quite a bit because of some of the chase rates and the at-bats that really eliminated this team from the playoffs here. But to stick with Thompson for the time being here, the last video that I dropped on this channel was kind of the realization and my kind of disappointing takeaway that I do think it is time for the Phillies to move on from him. I'm a little more surprised than anything that it is the extension at this point. If anything, my true expectation was that they would just kind of let the contract fizzle out, code it up as like a send off to retirement, that Thompson would get one last crack at it this coming season, and then he could kind of head into retirement, which there was never really the expectation that this guy would have a long career as a manager. Let's not forget that he was passed up on multiple times during his entire year as a bench coach and managing being an assistant coach on the Yankees, all these types of things that he has done. He was a guy that looked like he just never was getting the crack at it until Girardi was obviously fired, stepped up as an interim, and the rest is history for what we've seen for this current time. I still have my personal doubts about if he's the guy that can take this team over the edge, but with that all said, I once again am not hanging the hat on Rob Thompson that is the reason the Phillies are not playing baseball today. Now, a couple other notable factors that I think were noteworthy in this press conference here. To dive into this, and shout out to Devin Caney from WIP, who I think does a really nice job. She tweeted her little breakdowns here. So Topper and the coaching staff will all return. She says, "Seems like most of the core group will return, although offseason moves in addition haven't been discussed in depth yet. Rojas will spend the winter in Clearwater working on his offense." Dombrowski also declined to name him the starting center fielder next year, which I do think is a little bit noteworthy there, but might be nothing more than trying to light a fire under him. Continues to say that Taijuan Walker will be entering specialized training and will have to earn his role next season. Trey Turner will remain at shortstop. They will look to give JT more days off next season, and there is still no clear reason or insight to the drop-off in the back half of the season. So a lot to get into here. I want to start with Trey Turner in this particular conversation. Turner, for me, is probably my most frustrating part of this Phillies team, and it's not that he's a bad baseball player by any means, but he's a guy that has straight up played below his baseball card in both seasons in a Phillies uniform, and there is so much reliant on him being the guy that they paid him to be. That the expectation was for Trey Turner for him to be the co-star to Bryce Harper, to be a very clear foundational part of this Phillies roster, this core that they speak so glowingly about. And I honestly just don't see it. That yes, he's a good baseball player, but I don't think he is this guy that is going to be taking these massive step forwards in his game. I think who he is who he is. And again, like, not a guy that's going to kill you, but also not a guy that is going to win you a World Series. And that's kind of my fear there, that I think so many assets are allocated to Turner, and he simply has not quite lived up to that to this point. The best case scenario for this Phillies team, really what I think the biggest leap that they could take as a team as a whole, is Trey Turner having an above average season next year for his standards. If he can take a leap forward in his production, I do think that changes the entire construct of that team. He was also asked, Dombrowski was also asked specifically about Turner playing shortstop here, and he said, quote, "Trey will be our shortstop in the coming year," which I did think was interesting there. The defensive struggles were something that were talked about a little bit there. It's been very disappointing to me, Turner's defense in the field here, that I did not, I guess, not watching enough Dodgers baseball during his time here, I did not expect his reputation to be a guy that I would consider a slightly below average glove at shortstop there. Now, obviously, there's some great fielders at that position, but I don't think Turner's a guy who quite stands up to the rest of the league in that, and that wasn't anything that I was braced for expectation-wise. And Dombrowski was also asked about the falling apart in the second half of the season, and he said, quote, "We didn't hit. Some of it's chase, some of it's approach, and some of it's guys not being hot." Now, this is where it brings my biggest concern in this video. is really the number one takeaway for me for why they were eliminated from the playoffs from what they spoke about at that press conference is that they're just chalking it up to running into a hot Mets team. Now, is that the reality? Sure. Yes, the Mets were the hottest team in baseball, had played significantly better, just ball down the stretch, a ridiculous turnaround from midseason. They do have that team of destiny feel to them. But the Phillies are supposed to be a juggernaut. That this is supposed to be a legitimate World Series threat on a year in and year out basis that you can't quite roll over to just baseball fate that this team is hot and this team can beat you. And if we honestly really want to dive into that concept here, are we sure that the Phillies just didn't catch one of those streaks in 2022 and have regressed in the 2 years since? That what is it tangibly that this team has gotten better at or taken strides forward to in those times because they've taken steps back the past 2 seasons? So I understand, I can live with it to an extent that there is a randomness to baseball that you have to just blindly accept that sometimes the results just are what they are. But I think it's a little bit more of a cop-out that the Phillies are taking that position that the Mets just were a team of destiny, this hot team that they ran into at the wrong time. Yes, that is partially true, but you also should have the standard for yourself that you're better than that you're still capable of beating these level of teams. Now, a couple other that I did want to dive into here. This factor I think is really interesting. He was asked about Aid Miller in reference to some of the young talents in the organization, this being Dave Dombrowski here, and he said, quote, Aid Miller, I don't anticipate being ready this coming year. Now, how this is important to me is this directly ties into the future of Alec Bohm. That Bohm is obviously holding things down as the third baseman, was an all-star this year. And where I have a really difficult time with the Alec Bohm conversation is he doesn't suck. This isn't a guy that the Phillies have to move on to. But when you talk about raising the ceiling of this team, it is very clear to me that Alec Bohm is pretty near the top of who the organization is most frustrated with. I don't think it's a coincidence that he was benched in the playoffs. I do think it wears on the organization as a whole a little more than we have knowledge of all the poutiness, the slamming bats, the frustration, all these little things that the way that he carries himself. Now, Alec Bohm is a very good baseball player. In order to make this team better, you got to make sure you're improving in that direction here if you are going to move on from him. I do think Aid Miller is the player of the future, the guy that they clearly have in mind to step up and take that third base role. Miller started off his career as a shortstop, has transitioned into more of a third baseman now, and obviously Turner expected to hold things down as a shortstop for the foreseeable future, so that's really the route for Miller to get on the field here. I'm also slightly confused by Rob Thompson speaking very glowingly of Alec Bohm during this press conference here. So I'm going to continue to dive a little deeper into that with Luke Arcani as we kind of speak on the realistic outlook and what contractually makes sense for this Phillies team. But I do think that there was a bit of an Alec Bohm breaking point at the end of this playoff run. I do think Aiden Miller's not ready yet. I do want to bring up Alex Bregman and speak about if that could be the stopgap, the upgrade in the short term while still keeping that long-term option open with Aiden Miller there. But I do think that I want to dig deeper into that Alec Bohm conversation there. And once again, kind of my biggest takeaway from this, I didn't love just the tone of it's a bummer we ran into a hot team. I think this Phillies team should be beyond that at this point. That the mindset should very clearly be the expectation is for us to win a championship year in and year out, or at least be contending and taking steps closer. That is what this roster, the payroll indicates. That is what expectations are, and I think that should be held pretty standard there. That I don't think that is quite fair to just chalk it up as a bad matchup. The Phillies should be the team that others are circling as bad matchups for how they are currently constructed. I don't know what went wrong the second half of the season, and we likely never will. That, yes, the bats went cold, and yes, that cost them the series, whether that was fatigue, whether that was things like, just this team had gone deep into 2 postseasons before it, a lot of veteran legs. This is an older team. We have to keep all those things in mind. But the reality is, I need some change here. That they elected to keep the entire coaching staff. Rob Thompson at the head of it. Well, if they did not get the job done this year, and you just want to have this run it back, I'm not sure if I'm quite buying that one. There has to be some sort of notable steps forward, some sort of improvement with that team. And I didn't love that entire tone that's what we should be expecting here. So it did feel like we should be braced for a little bit milder of an offseason than I think should be the case, or I think we should be expecting to be the case. I will note, I do think he's still going after Juan Soto here. There was one little line where Dave Dombrowski, very calculated, playing things close to the vest, would not say much, but I do think that he's still going to be a big spender here. Kind of his quote when he was asked about it, as he said that he wouldn't say we necessarily need another star and pointed to all the all-stars, the most of any team in the MLB, all these factors. but it can never hurt to upgrade the team and sort of align to that extent, which did get my brain thinking there. So still a lot more to play out. Soto obviously still in the playoffs as a whole, and that likely is going to play a major role in what the future of his career is. If he does win a World Series with the Yankees, I do have a hard time believing that he would walk away from New York City and not continue his career there where he's already having success. But there is a lot of familiarity here. I do think that's an aspect of why Kevin Long is returning, who, of course, was his hitting coach during their time with the Nationals together. There is that relationship between Juan Soto with Trey Turner, with Bryce Harper from their time with the Nationals. I believe Kyle Schwarber overlapped as well. There's a lot of kind of familiar faces that are tied into. So that will be the biggest ticket talking point of the offseason that we will dig a little bit deeper into when he fully reaches the market and we kind of have those free agent discussions. But just a bit of what to expect. And my unfortunate takeaway overall is maybe we are in for a little bit subtler of an offseason than we overall expected. But let me know if you guys think in the comments. Did you read things differently in that press conference with me? Was there anything else that jumped out to you that I did not touch on here? We're going to be digging into it from a bunch of different angles. I'll be recording with Luke Arcani later tonight, so we'll have plenty more content coming out. Want to dig deeper into the Alec Boehm conversation, talk a little Bryson Stott as well as Trey Turner, the future of that, and everything else that he has on his mind. So make sure you guys are tapping in for that. And the best way to do that is by smashing that subscribe button on the channel, dropping a like on this video, any comments you have below. I'll be talking to you next time right here on Phillies Digest. Peace.